The views and opinions in the following program remain those of the producer, and in no way reflect the views and opinions of Medford Community Cablevision, its board of directors, management, or other affiliates.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Real Grass, Real Heroes, a look at the golden age of sports when the game was played on real grass, not AstroTurf. And, of course, the heroes were real heroes, not guys that could hit the ball 900 feet because they were juiced up. I'm your host, Jim Tuberosa, and we're going to bring you a real exciting show tonight. We've got a ton of things to talk about. Of course, the Red Sox have a new manager, and I'll definitely get into that. There's a hockey strike. My God, what's wrong with these guys? Of course, the Patriots are going over to England, and the Celtics are starting a brand new season. It's going to be a very exciting season. And we're going to start a new segment in a few minutes, so maybe about 10, 15 minutes or so. We're going to start a new segment called What's My Line? I have a famous, very little known publicly sports I'm just going to call him a handicapper. Okay, he's not a bookie, but he's very well known to the casinos out in Las Vegas, and we're going to have him on to do What's My Line. He'll give you 4 or 5 real picks, and at least 1 or 2 of them are going to be secret ones, and Vegas gets all upset when he hits them. I'll tell you his name in a few minutes, but right now I want to go right directly to the Red Sox. Bobby Valentine did not deserve the treatment that he got, in my estimation. The real culprit, I feel, is Theo Epstein, because he started everything way back by giving away tons of money to players that didn't deserve it. J.D. Drew did not deserve all the money he got, and of course, Sally, we'll call him Sally, you know who I'm talking about, the pitcher that got a ton of money and then doesn't pitch anymore, and the left fielder who they finally were able to get rid of. But to make matters even worse for poor Bobby Valentine, he didn't even have his own coaches in there, and he was being backscuttled by the coaches and the players. And now I'm going to stick my neck way out, and I'm going to mention 2 of Boston's very favorite players that I thought did Valentine dirt. The first one was Dustin Pedroia. Great guy, love him here, but when he ever spoke out and said about Valentine, saying, "We don't do things like that around here," well, that immediately split up the team. And then Big Papi, David Ortiz, could have said some good things about him or just kept his mouth shut, but no, they just fueled the fire. And Bobby Valentine, I feel, got run out of town, and he didn't deserve to get run out of town. Guys quit on him. Everybody out there knows it. There were guys out there that quit on him. So now they bring in, I think Farrell will make a good manager, and hopefully he's there to, I won't say mollycoddle, but he'll be good friends and stop the running up the back stairs to Larry Lucchino, and maybe get these guys to get out there and play. I'll tell you something. I'm in favor, and have been for a long time, and I know a ton of people who feel the same way. I'm in favor of calling out players and maybe finding a punishment for them in the Major League Baseball's front offices for guys who have these huge contracts and then behave like spoiled babies, and they start not putting out, you know. And Beckett was one of them. This guy just did not put out. He wanted everything his way. He got upset when Valentine said you take too much time between pitches, and he pretty well shut down. So that's what I got to say about that. By the way, it reminds me way back when I was a little kid. The Red Sox had as a manager probably one of the greatest baseball managers in the history of baseball, Joe McCarthy. He brought the Red Sox in the 3 years he was here, brought them right on the brink of first place. They wound up in a tie in 1948 and then lost the playoff game. 1949, they were 1 game ahead of the Yankees with 2 games to go in New York, and the Red Sox lost both of them. You know, in 1950, they finished a few games out, but they were still competitive right up to the last few days. And the media just kept on hopping and hopping. All these guys care about is hitting home runs and hitting home runs. And the media finally drove McCarthy out of town. And Tom Yawkey went and hired a guy named Steve O'Neill. Nice guy. But he said, things are going to change out there. And he had all the great players bunting every now and then, even Ted Williams. They called him Bunty O'Neill. Needless to say, he didn't last. He just lasted a season, and that was the end of that. But I'm glad that they've done something. Hopefully the front office are going to stay out of the way and not bother these guys. And I'm talking about the general manager as well as Farrell. Farrell's going to be allowed to pick all of his own assistant coaches. With regard to the strike, there's not much to say about the strike. It's no accident that Donald Fair in there, and his name was pronounced Fair for many years, and then he decided he wanted to pronounce Fear. And so you have fear of a strike. That's his first and last resort, a strike. The owners who put up all the money and take all the risks and everything else are providing a venue for these overblown kids to make a ton of money. And by the way, I firmly believe it. I talked to a couple of Patriots, talked to a couple of Bruins, and they said they don't know a heck of a lot of guys. There's not a ton of guys out there that really want to strike. You know, but you don't dare speak out against it, or else you're persona non grata around the league. So that's the way it is. The players don't get paid. Of course, Donald Fair gets paid, you know, strike or no, and he gets another notch in his gun out there. Okay, Patriots, Celtics, wow, great season. By the way, I'm looking for the Patriots to turn things around. I don't have to tell you that the three games that they've lost were by a total of, 5 points? Unbelievable. And they were lost through stupidity. They could very easily right now be 7-0. The game last week that they had to win in overtime, it was through stupidity. I do not like the offensive coordinator, the plays that he calls, no rhyme or reason. And I've been saying all year, and a lot of my friends who do know the game of football have been saying all along, what the heck is wrong with the coach of the backfield, the defensive backfield? He's teaching these guys all wrong. And finally, last week, Timmy Fox, great Patriot from a few years back, he stepped up and said, very simple, play the ball. He says the Patriots should have 6 more interceptions than they already have. So that's what we got to say about that. In about 5 minutes or so, maybe even quicker, we'll have our mystery guest on the line to talk about betting the different games. And the segment will be called What's My Line? So for all you guys out there who like to bet, right now it's the football games, but make sure you pay attention. You know, getting back to the old Red Sox and the old Celtics, by the way. As a matter of fact, since the Celtics season is just starting up, I'll talk about them and tell some stories. The players, we've got some exciting new players, and our draft is unbelievable. I like, okay, I wrote it down, Jared Sullinger. I was at the draft, and when they drafted him in the first round, and I was sitting with Tommy Heinsohn, was sitting with Satch Sanders, and was sitting with Togo Palazzi. Oh, we got a caller on the line. Okay, I was sitting Togo Palazzi. Everybody was excited when they picked him, and Tommy said I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up as a starter for the Celtics. Okay, hi, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Jim.
Stace. Okay, we have our mystery guest for What's My Line, and his name is Cecil Schmedley. And this guy, I got to do a background on you, Cease. This guy can pick out, you know, out in Vegas, all the big bookies and all the big gaming rooms. They'll always throw in 2 or 3 real stickouts that you don't realize that this thing is a real stickout. Well, Cease, Cecil Schmedley has them all. As a matter of fact, when they take a big hit on these games, I've heard the story that the guys say, "Oh my God, we've been Schmedleyed." So, and by the way, Cease, I understand that your brother Headley is the one that come up with the idea for What's My Line. And obviously, you learned everything that you know from Headley, but we can't, he won't get into the public eye because who wants to talk to a guy named Headley Schmedley? But at any rate, hey, thanks for coming on the show. But what do you got for us this week?
Well, I see a line that's opened up at 7 and 7.5. That would be Denver over the New Orleans Saints.
Wow.
It's dropped now to 6.5 and 6, and I would expect it to drop some more.
Sure.
But I would assume anybody with any brains would grab New Orleans as quick as they can.
I got a question for you. Roughly, how much money around the country has to be bet to make the line change even a half a point?
Well, at various casinos, okay, when you go into a casino, let's say in Las Vegas, Reno, or maybe Carson City,
Sure.
in Nevada, and you go in and you bet $3,000. A lot of places won't take a $3,000 bet, and people would say they bet $2 million. That's all bull. Okay.
Yeah.
You go into any casino and try to bet $5,000.
Yeah.
Okay. As soon as you bet the $5,000, they'll move the line a point.
Is that right? Wow.
Or half a, absolutely.
Sure.
I've seen it 100,000 times. So I don't know exactly how much would have to be bet, but as soon as they open up a line, you'll see the Monday morning papers with lines, and then Tuesday there'll be big differentials, a point, 2 points, 2.5 points. That's because the money goes on that particular side.
I got you.
And this week here, that line opened at 7 and 7.5, and it's already down to 6. So I would assume it'll go lower. Yeah, I just think it's a bad line. Whoever's making these lines stinks.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been to Vegas many, many times through the years. There are different casinos that have a different line, like maybe a half a point or a point in one direction or the other. Is that right?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. They never have all the same. I mean, that's why you have people what you call that are shoppers. They shop for a half a point.
Sure.
At a different store. And smart better will do that.
You know,
but I just myself, offhand, I just think it's just a bad number. That's to me. New Orleans is fighting for their life.
Yeah. You know, I remember a Super Bowl several years ago. I think it was San Francisco and San Diego. And the line opened up at about 17.5 points. And it eventually dropped down to about 13.5, 14 points. I know about 4 or 5 guys that jumped on the first part, and then when it dropped down, they jumped. No, they jumped on the first part. They jumped on the first part, and then they jumped on the second part.
And they won both bets.
And they won both bets. Do you remember that? They call it middling, I believe.
Well, that happened years ago in one of the earlier Super Bowls with Pittsburgh and Dallas.
Yeah.
The line opened up at 3.5, and they took a ton of money on Pittsburgh, and the line went all the way up to 5.5, and they all bet Dallas, and then it settled at 5.
Yeah.
And the game came 4, and it was not a good day for the casinos.
Yeah, I guess not. But, I'm remembering back to Super Bowl III when the New York Jets opened up, and I think they stayed at about 19.5 points.
19. I was at the game.
No kidding. Did you have the Jets?
I had the Colts.
Oh, my God.
And in the later years, I had the pleasure of being with Earl Morrow.
Yeah, he was something else. Good, one of the best backups ever.
at the end of the conversation, during the day, I spent a whole day with him. I said, Earl, I got to ask you one question. And he said, what? I said, why didn't you throw the ball at Jimmy Orr?
Oh, my God, I remember that so well, yeah.
And you know what he said? He said, my pass was a touchdown. The guy it would have been a touchdown.
Sure.
But I spent the day with Earl Morrow, okay?
Yeah.
And he was one of the most astute people I ever was with. I don't know how your memory is, Jim, but do you remember in the 60s, or maybe it might have been even the late 50s, that the plane was circling Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, buzzing the field and crashed into the stands?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
He did. How about this one, Han? I was talking to him about when Mike Curtis hit the guy that ran on the field on a Monday night game.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that very well.
And I said to him, I said, Jim, if that was today, that guy would have got sued from here.
Lawsuits all over the world, sure.
To next Easter. And you know what he said to me?
What?
He said that did go to court. I said, you kidding me?
And
he said, no, it went to court.
Yeah.
He said, and it went to court, and they got Curtis, went before the judge, and the judge, had said something to him. And he said to the judge, what happened? He says, Your Honor, he said, I've been playing football since I was 9 years old. And I played nothing but defense my whole life. And all I've ever been taught was whoever's got the ball, hit him. That guy come across the field, and I hit him. And they dismissed the case.
Okay, it's funny that you come up with that story. Hollywood came out with a movie about 7, 8, 9 years ago called Replacement Players with Keanu Reeves. And you remember that?
Yeah.
You remember that? And now in football, in practices, the quarterback or anybody who's not supposed to be hit wears a red jersey. And so the first scrimmage play, he fades back to pass. The middle linebacker and the defense come storming through, and he buries him. And so the coach, Gene Hackman, goes over and he says, you can't hit the guy with the red jersey. And he says, I don't know, Coach, I see red. He was really nuts. And so the very next play, boom, he did it again, And so I heard from some friends of mine that write Hollywood scripts. They said that part was taken right from Mike Curtis's testimony. I see a guy with the ball, I got to kill him. But if nobody's ever seen that movie, watch it. It's a lot of fun. Tell me about your take. I'm going to shift away a little bit from the lines on the games coming up. But tell me your take on the Red Sox new manager and on Bobby Valentine getting run out of town.
Well, I never cared for Valentine, so I don't really think they got run out of town. I think they had no choice but to get rid of him.
Yep.
And
you got some background problems.
As far as the new guy, the Red Sox haven't had any good pitching since he left.
Yeah, I understand. You're absolutely right.
He was a great pitching coach. So
hopefully that'll fix the bleeding, and these players will get back in line and remember that they're supposed to play. Guys like Dustin Pedroia and David Ortiz should stop talking to the media and get out there and play. But okay, the Patriots going over the pond over to England, playing that game. I understand it's a 7-pointer for the Patriots.
I like the Pats.
Yep.
The Rams have a good defense, but the Pats will score against anybody.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I also like Miami this week.
Really?
Yeah.
Who are they playing? I don't have the sheets in front of me.
The Jets.
They're playing the Jets. It'll be interesting.
And
Throughout
I'll give you the upset special.
Really, Miami's favorite, huh?
Yeah, Miami's a small favorite. I like them.
Yeah, historically, the Jets have always been able to do better in Miami than expected to do. They don't always win, but they do a lot better than they're expected to.
And the big upset for me, I like the Philadelphia Eagles to end Atlanta's unbeaten season.
I don't know how Atlanta has stayed unbeaten. I think there's at least one.
They won't be after Sunday.
Say it again.
They won't be after Sunday.
How have they stayed undefeated? There's a couple of those games that they should have lost.
Yeah.
But then they got a pretty good quarterback down there, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah, the kid from BC. But, I'm waiting to see more and more. I want people to come out, the newspapers to come out with more stories about how important assistant coaches are to the team. And I think there are some teams, the Patriots.
Assistant coaches are important.
The Patriots have a couple of assistant coaches that I think are either not doing the job or whatever. The defensive backfield, absolutely. And I don't like the play selection that they've been having in there. And I wish they'd stop trying to force feed this Brandon Lloyd.
Well, what they got to do is, all they have to do to improve is mix a few more screens in there, and maybe a reverse once in a while. I think they'll be fine.
There you go. I don't disagree with you. But, I like to watch the play other than the line play and watch, players going out and pass patterns and everything. And Lloyd does not seem to be one of those guys that will run to an open space. And that might be because he and Brady are not on quite on the comfortable page yet that he is with the other guys.
Who would you rather have? Would you rather have him or Chad Ochocinco?
Oh, my God. I'd rather have you than Ochocinco.
Okay, well, don't worry about it. Lloyd will be fine. He'll have a big game Sunday. Watch.
I'm not talking about Lloyd. I'm talking about Brady. If the guy's not open, you don't throw into double and triple coverage.
He'll be fine.
His other receivers run to the open spaces.
I understand that. But watch the other teams. Watch the other teams' quarterbacks. Tell me what they do.
If they don't have a Patriot jersey on, I don't care what they do.
He's blessed. We're blessed. Jim, I got to go.
Hey.
I have people waiting for me.
I understand. Thank you so very much. Next show.
That's a Cecil Smedley signing off, Jim.
And say hello to your brother, Hedley Smedley, for me.
Okay, thanks,
Take care.
Jim. Bye.
It's funny. They're a funny act out there. But Cecil and his brother, Hedley, but I know more about Cease. God, they pick games that you just wouldn't believe and make it entertaining. Okay, if you want to join in and give a call, our phone number will be up there in a second. But we'll talk about I want to talk about the Celtics right now. I'm going to run down their roster. Okay, now here's somebody that we haven't heard a lot about, but he's a shooting guard, Leandros Barbosa. He's been in the league for 9 years. He's only 29 years old, and I haven't seen a lot of him. But the consensus is that Danny Ainge pulled a real coup by bringing him in. Okay, and of course Brandon Bass is terrific. He does it all, clears the offensive boards as well as defensive boards. Avery Bradley, I think, is going to be a big, big key when he gets healthy. Now, I understand that he won't be back until after Christmas, or maybe after New Year's. But Avery Bradley is a key defensive player. He's only 6 feet tall, and I watch this guy, block shots. He's got about a 4-foot vertical jump, and he's got a real good outside shot, a great three-point shot. So I'm looking forward to seeing him get back in the lineup. And of course, Kevin Garnett, there's not too much to say about Kevin Garnett. He's one of the greatest, and my feeling is, the talk is he's just a half a step behind Larry Bird and Bill Russell. And they put Bill Russell and Larry Bird on an even par. And I don't have a big problem with that. But Kevin Garnett, my feeling is he stands right beside them. This guy means so much to the team. And now Jeff Green at 6'9", okay, and he's had a couple of years of rest, and he's fully recovered. We've been watching him, by the way. I don't know if you folks out there have been watching, but he does everything. He can fill in I believe he can fill in at 4 positions. I'm including the shooting guard, because there are some tall, very tall 6'7" shooting guards out there. But he can play the small forward, he can play the power forward, and he can even jump in there at center. This is a scenario that I see as a possibility, okay? When we need to give Paul Pierce a break, he can come off the bench and give Pierce a break. And then when you have to give Kevin Garnett a break, you bring Paul Pierce back in and you move Green over to Kevin Garnett's spot. And then if you have to give even the small forward a break, you can move him over the power forward. You can move him over to the power forward spot. And should you ever have to match up against a really large shooting guard, you can certainly do that with Jeff Green. Jeff Green is hopefully, I see Jeff Green as possibly a 6th-man candidate, because I believe that we're going to have Jared Sullinger is going to be a starter. He'll be starting at the power forward spot, I believe. Now, for all you old-timers out there who may remember, we had Jungle Jim Lesketoff on many of those great Celtic teams, starting with the very first championship in 1957. He was the starting power forward. And remember, Auerbach used to say, it's not who starts the game, it's who finishes the game is what counts, and I agree with him completely, which doesn't mean to denigrate Jungle Jim out there, but some of you folks may remember, some of you old-timers like myself, and my birthday's tomorrow, so I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm past 60. But the Celtics won their first world championship by 2 points, okay, 127 to 125. And when the game was tied, Jim Lesketoff made 2 free throws that put them ahead, and they turned out to be the winning margin. So anybody who sells Jim Lesketoff short is calling him simply a hatchet man. Not the case. He did it all. And that team was a team with a capital T. And just Tommy Heinsohn was on that team. As a matter of fact, Tommy Heinsohn was Rookie of the Year. And don't forget, he and Bill Russell were rookies the same year. And Tommy Heinsohn won the Rookie of the Year. But talk to Tommy Heinsohn. I'd like to see Tommy Heinsohn doing a lot more stories about those days. There's a ton of great stories that you just couldn't believe. And most of them are very humorous. And, you know, as soon as I finish running down the rest of the players, I'll get back and I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. And by the way, speaking of Jim Lesketoff, his predecessor, Bob Branham, was the very first policeman in the, I was going to say the NFL, the NBA. We'll talk about that in a second. But going down the list, after Jeff Green, they got picked up Courtney Lee. Now, Courtney Lee he's a shooting guard, and he's 6'5". But this guy is a replacement for Ray Allen, and he'll make you forget about Ray Allen. Remember that name, Courtney Lee. Fab Mello, I don't know what he's going to be able to do. He is a project, and he's a shot blocker, and Danny Ainge saw something in him to take him with a first-round pick. And don't forget, this is like the 17th or 18th pick in the draft. So a lot of other players passed on this 7-footer. Red Auerbach always said, 2 things you can't teach, speed and height. And this guy definitely has the height anyway. And he looks like, with a little bit of work, he could really be something. But Darko Milicic, only 27 years old, he's another 7-footer. Danny picked him up. He's been with about 3 or 4 teams. And if I'm not mistaken, Darko was the number 2 player picked in the entire draft about, I think it was about 6, 7 years ago. And of all things, Danny got him for $854,000 against the salary cap. I've hit the point where, just like we said, in Red Auerbach we trust, and Bill Parcells we trust, and now Bill Belichick, well, in Danny Ainge we trust. And of course, Paul Pierce, what more can you say about Pierce? Matter of fact, I'm looking for him to have a real good year. He looks leaner and in better shape than I've seen him in several years. And Rajon Rondo, all I want Rondo to do is learn how to shoot free throws. He's got to move his free throw average up to at least 825, 850. He can't stay down in the high fives and the low sixes forever. And free throw shooting is the easiest thing on the basketball court to fix. All you have to do is get out there and take 1,000 free throws a day, and you got it. Now, you may remember Paul Pierce, as a rookie, only had about a 630, 640 average from the free throw line. Now, he's up in the high 800s, so he worked to get up there. Rajon Rondo should be up there, and Rajon Rondo is not a shooter. For all you folks out there who applaud Rajon Rondo when he gets a triple-double, he's got to take about 26, 27 shots to get that triple-double. When he's taking all those shots, the shooters on the team are not getting the shots. Now, there were a few games that we watched last year with Ray Allen when Rajon Rondo got a triple-double, when he got like 26, 27 points. He took 26 or 27 shots. Ray Allen would take 9 or 10 shots. Paul Pierce would take 9, 10, 11, 12 shots. And then half of those games that Rondo got a triple-double, the Celtics lost. Which brings me to an old story. Tom Sanders was a first-round pick for the Celtics, and Red Auerbach wanted him for his defensive abilities. In college, Sanders was a scorer. And at one point, Sanders would get out there and he would, cover his man and, be real tight on the guy. And he was always up against the best forwards that the other team had. Well, at one point, he started shooting the ball. One game, he shot the ball, scored about 24 points. And the Celtics won that game. Next game, boom, he started shooting again. He scored about 22 points, and the Celtics lost. Well, make a long story short, after 4 games in a row that he scored in the 20s, the Celtics have won 2 and lost 2. And so Red Auerbach said to him, look, he says, you're a great player. He says, but you have to make up your mind. You're either going to score in the 20s or you're going to win ball games. You can't do both. I need you on defense. And Satch, who a very quiet, gentle, brilliant guy, by the way, and Satch said that made sense to him, changed his whole life. And, of course, it changed the Celtics' life also. He was on several world championship teams. Okay, but that's what I got to say about Rajon Rondo. Jared Sullinger, wow, reminds me of a young Cedric Maxwell. And they don't look exactly alike, but Jared Sullinger does the things that Cedric Maxwell does. He'll sweep up the boards. He'll pop in that little 12-footer. He boxes out. And I've talked several times with, I started calling him Cornbread, but I found out a while ago he decided he doesn't like that name anymore. But Cedric Maxwell, I said, what does it take? How are you such a great rebounder? He said, you just got to be determined, and you got to work your butt off, and no matter what, you got to stay in there and be determined, and you'll get it. And that's what this kid, Sullinger, is doing, and he does box out. There are too few fans out there that realize how important just doing simple things like boxing out is. It doesn't show up on the scoreboard, but very, very important stat. Jason Terry is shooting guard. Okay, he's 35 years old, but Jason Terry is a former sixth man. He's won the award named for Frank Ramsey, but it's called the Sixth Man Award. Frank Ramsey was the very first sixth man, and it was Red Auerbach's philosophy that a guy that could start, and Ramsey could start for anybody, but at about the 5.5, 6 minute mark, when the other team made a substitution, they were weakening their team. When Red made a substitution and brought in Ramsey, he was elevating his team, so that would always give them a boost. Good common sense. And last of all, Chris Wilcox, 6'10", he just turned 30 years old, and he's only making $854,000. But at 6'10", he's a terrific, terrific power forward, does all the basic things that you ask of him, and Danny loves him. Matter of fact, in talking with Wilcox last year, I said, by the way, you know the number you're wearing? He says, yeah. He says, Danny gave me that number. He says, so Danny must have liked my play or something to get me to wear his number 44. And that's what we got with the Celtics. I wonder how many people out there agree or disagree. I think the Celtics can go all the way. It's going to be very interesting. It depends upon, this is definitely a case of not what you get, but when you get it. And I hate, I can't tell you how sick and tired I am of having the reputation of fading in the stretch. And we lose more double-digit leads. I say we, the Celtics, lose more double-digit leads in the fourth period and lose the games than any other team in the history of basketball. And we got to change that around. You know, you can't leave a guy in there that's dead tired just because he's a perennial all-star or whatever. Maybe make a contingency so that in the last 5-6 minutes, he's not dead tired. So that's all I got to say about that one. Okay, 855-662-4788. My name is Jim Tuberosa, and the name of the show is Real Grass, Real Heroes. And, you know, there's, I don't know if I ever told you guys the story about Real Grass, Real Heroes, but there's the book by Dominic DiMaggio. And I got to do an interview for 1 hour and 56 minutes. I had Dom DiMaggio all to myself. And we sat down, talked about everything under the sun. What an amazing guy. Now, he was a big star when I was a little kid. And watching him play center field for the Red Sox was just unbelievable. Now, some of you younger folks will remember about 5 years or so ago, J.D. Drew threw a runner at the plate. Bases were loaded, and the ball was hit. It looked like it might drop in, might not, and so the runner on third was not off with the crack of the bat. Well, J.D. Drew short-hopped it, and he threw a strike to the plate, and they forced the runner at the plate. Everybody under the sun just said, oh, my God, we never saw that happen. Well, yeah, we did see it happen, and here's the story behind the whole thing. Now, when I was sitting down with Dom DiMaggio, and we were in the VIP room at the World Trade Center preparing to do a show, and it was the last tribute to Johnny Most before he died. And I brought that up to Dom, and he remembered every single detail. He even remembered the count, knew the player, everything. But the Red Sox were playing the Yankees, and I believe it was past the halfway point, but it was a crucial game. The Red Sox were leading 1-0. And I think they were fighting for first place. I think one or the other was one game out. I think the Red Sox were ahead by one game, ahead of the Yankees. The pitcher was, well, I'll get to the pitcher in a second. But the Yankees got the bases loaded, and I'll get to the pitcher in a second because I just lost his name. But he had a nickname. And don't ever get old, guys. CRS. Can't remember stuff. But at any rate, it was the fifth inning. The pitcher had walked the bases loaded. Okay? And they say, well, why the heck did they leave him in there? He walked the bases loaded, and the Red Sox were leading 1-0. And the reason they left him in there was he had a no-hitter going. Ike DeLock, Ivan DeLock, and we called him Ike. And Dominic remembered every single detail about this. And so here they are. It's a 2-1 count, by the way, on this guy. Ike DeLock either walked you or he struck you out was the old joke about it. And Dominic was playing shallow, you know, and he even reminded me, he says, people forget, he says, in the minor leagues, I was a shortstop. And he played center field shallow, and he played it side saddle. the only player that I ever heard of, he played a side saddle. He was facing left field, and his left hip was facing the plate. He said he could get a better junk either moving forward or moving back or moving left or right, and he could see the pitch very well. Well, 2-1, the batter was Gil McDougall. He was their shortstop at that time. This was 1950. And there's a line drive hit out to center field. Dominic charged the ball, never took his eye off home plate, short hopped it and threw a perfect strike to Sammy White and forced the runner at the plate. Unbelievable. But, you know, the greatest part for me was listening to Dominic tell that story. And he was smiling. Now, Dominic is usually a very serious guy, but he was smiling, and he told me later on he was very impressed that I had such a great memory. I said, well, gee, Dom, you've got an even greater memory. You know, and he swapped stories back and forth. We told. I would jog his memory, and then he'd go and tell me the story with all the background to it and everything. It was just a great, great thing. But he talked about, by the way, his book is about the 1941 season. Real Grass, Real Heroes. Any baseball fan out there, or anybody, but any baseball fan, especially old-timers who may have been around in those days, you know, the 1941 season was perhaps the most eventful and greatest season in the history of baseball. And the only man in the universe that could write that story from this perspective was Dominic DiMaggio. Dom's brother Joe, that was the year he hit safely in 56 consecutive games. They were front page news every single day. But not only that, Teddy Ballgame, Ted Williams, Dominic's best friend and teammate, was on his way to a 4.06 average for the season. Nobody had done it in years, and nobody has done it since 1941. But not only that, and Dominic is quick to bring it up, he says, but not only that, he said, we were facing a war. This was the beginning of World War II. And of course, the season took place before Pearl Harbor. But everybody knew that the United States was going to wind up in that war. And things were going back and forth. But all the stories that Dom has in this, he brings up dozens of ball players, great ball players. Bob Feller among them. And God, there's just so many of them and so many different games and different instances. He brings you into the way it was traveling. The players all traveled by train, you know, and he talked about rookies and talked about the sports writers, how the sports writers and the ball players were so much closer. But if you get a chance to pick it up, or go to your library. Real Grass, Real Heroes. You won't be sorry you did. You know, I promised you some stories about the Celtics, and I mentioned Jim Lesketoff, and his predecessor was Bob Branham. Now, when Red Auerbach first took over the team, took over the Celtics in 1950, he went out and he searched for Bob Branham. Now, Bob Branham was about 6'6", maybe 6'7", went about 275, 280, and was a tough guy. But in 1948, in college, Bob Branham led the country in scoring. But he always wanted to play winning basketball, and Red Auerbach convinced him. He said, what I need you for is to make sure none of those big bruising bullies out there take advantage of our guys. And that's what the other teams were doing. I mean, Ed McCauley, one of the greatest centers of all time, was 6'8", and he went about 180 pounds. You know, and he could rebound, but he'd get beat up under there. And many times the other teams would take advantage of him with some cheap shots. But he just kept on going back and kept on, you know, took a licking and kept on ticking. But he was also a great shooter. And he's a scorer, and he averaged over 20 points a game, you know, many seasons that he was in there. But he, Bob Cousy, and Bill Sharman were getting beaten up by the other guys. And when they'd send in their hatchet men, well, Auerbach decided he wanted somebody to make them stop doing it. And so he brought in Bob Branham, told Branham what he wanted, and Branham just smiled and he said, sure thing. And what he wanted was not to send Branham in and go beat up the other bullies. He says, anybody messes with our players, you go out and you nail their star. Now, the funny story that I'm getting to, and you run across any old-timers, especially from Syracuse, or the old Celtics, they'll all chuckle about it and just nod and say, yep, that's the way it happened. But I think the season was 1954, and they were playing Syracuse, and Syracuse had a guy named Red Roca, who was a bully. He'd really get in with the elbows and everything, and he didn't mind hitting you with his shoulder, threw up for a rebound, undercut you, do all kinds of bad stuff. And so they had the star of their team was Dolph Shays, who he was a gentleman. He was like a Larry Bird. He was about 6'7", had a nice soft shot, but he rebounded, did everything superlatively. So one particular game, when our guys were getting beaten up, Red threw Branham in there. He says, you go out and you get their star. And so in rebounding action, all of a sudden, Dolph Shays get hit in the nose and got his nose broken. So, I don't know how many games later, maybe about 4 or 5 weeks later, the same scenario pops up and poor Dolph Shays gets his nose broken again. So now I think it was in the playoffs. And they're in that same situation again. And Roca goes and fouls one of our guys. They called Branham into the game, and Shays immediately ran over and he whacked Roca. He says, cut it out. He says, I don't want to keep getting my nose broken. But it started becoming a joke that every time, and Auerbach admitted that he did it just for the showmanship. When he would send in Branham to replace somebody, you'd hear, for Boston number 18, Bob Branham, you would immediately hear, replacing Dolph Shays. So whenever Auerbach wanted Shays out of the game, he'd send Branham in. And just another one of the funny stories. And the Celtics have tons and tons of stories. Those guys were a team. Red Auerbach should be singled out as one of the most influential men in the history of sports, not just the Celtics. And Bill Parcells is one of the first guys that will tell you that. He says, Auerbach knew how to build a team. And that's what Parcells' forte was, building a team. In baseball, in football, you need 1 or 2 team leaders in the defensive backfield, 1 or 2 team leaders among the linebackers, team leader among the defensive line, so on and so forth. The offensive line had to have a team leader. Now, Matt Light, he was here several years longer than he probably should have been, but Matt Light was the team leader there. He kept the clubhouse loose. He kept the offensive line loose. And so that's how important it is. Bill Belichick, that's what Bill Belichick learned under Bill Parcells. He knows how to build a team. And when Bill Belichick was out in Cleveland, well, his first year there he had a decent team, but he made the mistake of dumping the quarterback. And he should have done it. The quarterback was a team leader. And not only that, but he had been a big star at Ohio State. And the team just never responded to him after that. And Belichick went down the drain as a head coach, went back as an assistant coach under Bill Parcells, and worked his way back up. And now in Bill we trust, and I mean Belichick. And if Parcells came back, I would trust in Parcells too. But there are other teams in other sports that have done similar things, used a similar principle. Gene Conley. Gene Conley, if you're a regular listener, you've had Gene Conley on a couple of times. Gene Conley's become a very good and dear friend. But Gene Conley is the only man in history, in sports history, to win a world championship in 2 different sports, major sports. He was with the Braves in 1947, the Milwaukee Braves, but he had pitched for the Boston Braves in his rookie year. Milwaukee Braves in 1957, they beat the Yankees for the World Championship. And then in 59, 60, and 61, he played with the Celtics and won 3 titles in a row. Matter of fact, I hounded him for about 8 years, and finally his wife actually wrote the book, but it's called One of a Kind, and it's the story of Gene Conley. And he was one heck of a ball player. Got some great stories. I first became acquainted with Gene Conley. Oh, it was around 1979, 1980. I used to go to the Boston Braves. Every year, the Boston Braves had a reunion here in Boston at Boston University. And I met him there. We got to chatting about this, that. Nicest guy in the world. And the friendship just blossomed from there. And but at any rate, the story I was going to tell you, when Gene Conley was with the Celtics, he was riding with Red Auerbach. They were driving up to Maine. Auerbach used to like to take the team to small towns around New England and show them what real basketball, NBA basketball, was like. Remember, Auerbach said on more than one occasion, he says, a lot of these towns have their local teams that they say, these teams are great, they're just as good as any professional team around. So Auerbach would take them up there and he'd beat them by 40, 50, 60 points. You know, and the funny thing is, Auerbach was said one time when they beat a team by about 52, 53 points, he said, I didn't want to humiliate them. We could have scored 100 points. But he just wanted enough to show them how much better they were. So getting back to my story, Gene Conley, who was already a pitcher of some note, he had all-star game victories, and he pitched for the Red Sox as well as the Braves. And it was in 1959, and I'll give you a side story on this. 1959 was his first year back with the Celtics. He had been with them earlier in 1953-54 for a quick cup of coffee, and then the Braves moving out of town. They didn't want him playing two sports. So at any rate, the 1959 World Series against the Chicago White Sox and the Los Angeles Dodgers. And in game one, the White Sox had their pitcher, it was either Mike Garcia or Early Wynn, I forget which, but he was a former Cleveland pitcher. And I think it was Mike Garcia. But anyway, he was head and shoulders above most of the other pitchers in baseball. And he was a power pitcher and all. And so in the top half of the inning, of inning number one, don't forget their pitcher hasn't been on the field yet. Inning number one, Chicago scores 9 runs. They're leading 9-0. Auerbach says to Conley, take him out. Don't even let him pitch and bring him back tomorrow. And so Conley said, no, they won't take him out. He says, why not? He says, because he's got a shutout going. So he gets in, he pitches the first inning, the second inning. He says, oh, and beside, he says, they won't take him out because he won't get credit for the win. And Auerbach said, what win are you talking about? He says, isn't the title the thing that you're shooting for? What's the point of winning one battle but losing the war? He says, take him the heck out and bring him back tomorrow. He says, any bullpen that can't hold a 9-0 lead doesn't belong in the major leagues, which makes absolute sense, good common sense. So at any rate, now he says he's got to pitch 4.5 innings, before he'll get credit. So now the 4.5 innings come, and they're still leading 9-0. So Auerbach says, okay, now they can take him out. Maybe bring him back in 2 days instead of having to wait 4 days. He says, no, he says, they can't take him out. He's got a shutout going. Auerbach says, what are you, crazy? He's got a shutout going. Well, anyhow, they leave him in. Finally, in the 8th inning, the Dodgers score a run. They take out the pitcher, but guess what? They had to take him out. It was a damp day, and his shoulders started to stiffen up. So Chicago won the game. I think they won it 9-0, 9-1 or whatever. But the pitcher never pitched again. So that's just plain common sense. If they had used the Auerbach philosophy, and by the way, they lost the series 4-1. They never won another game. Chicago lost 4 games in a row, never won another game. But anyhow, I don't know if we have something wrong with our telephones or what, but somebody up there tell me, how much time do we have left to the show? Okay, are we going an hour, or is it going to be an hour-and-a-half show? Okay, and I don't see the... Okay, guys, 10 minutes left. Okay, Okay, you put up our phone number up there if anybody wants to call in, and we still have a bunch of people I want to talk about. But with the Patriots, does anybody out there have any qualms with the way the defensive backfield has been playing? And obviously, they're number one in the NFL in touchdown passes allowed. But they're also way head and shoulders ahead of everybody else in holding or pass interference penalties by the referees. And I'm seeing several plays. We already last week I counted 3 of them where it never should have been called. They call it holding. Within the first 5 yards, you're allowed to bump whatever, the pass receiver. And you guys are just barely touching them. And they're calling these penalties. And especially one of them was on a 3rd down, and it would have been, a 3 and out. But a 5-yard penalty, but it's an automatic first down. That stinks. And some of the pass interferences are just horrible pass interference calls. But not only that, I've seen them go the other way. Now, I watched the play with the Patriots, and I forget who the receiver was, but the guy pushed off. It's an offensive player, by the way. It was the other team. And the Jet player just, created a couple of feet of space in front of him, and they never called offensive pass interference. The next series of downs, Brandon Lloyd did pretty much the same thing, and it's not that he pushed the guy way out. His hand was out there, and they called it against him, and that would have given them a first down. Instead, now they had 20 yards to go for a first down instead of 10, and they never recovered from it. And then the Jets went down, got the ball, and they kicked the field goal that put them ahead. Okay, referees should not be affecting the outcome of games, and we've seen it time and time again. It's almost like they're ticked off at the Patriots for something. I was told several years ago by Bucko Kilroy, of all things. Bucko Kilroy, for you folks who don't know, he was a great, great offensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles in the 50s, but he was the Patriots vice president in charge of a number of different things. I think it was probably league relations. But he told us one time, I was with Will McDonough, and we were talking about why the heck isn't Gino Cappelletti in the Hall of Fame? And Bucko said, look, he says, these guys down in Texas that are running the NFL, I think he was talking about the Hunt brothers and the other guys down there, and he says, these guys will not let anybody from Boston get into the NFL Hall of Fame if they have anything to say about it. Now, fortunately, we finally got John Hanna, and nobody could keep him out of the Hall of Fame. And then Andre Tippett got into the Hall of Fame. But there are a couple of others, most notably, absolutely positively, no doubt about it, Gino Cappelletti belongs in the Hall of Fame. But the crux of my story is from Bucko. He says, those powers to be in the NFL are not forgetting that Boston would not support an NFL team, and up until the Patriots. Now, leading up to that, back in the 30s and the 40s and early 50s, Boston had 3 different NFL teams come in. One of them was the Boston Yanks. They never made it. Okay, this town would not support them. Another one, I believe, was the Boston Dodgers. But most notably, and this might have been the very first one, it was the Boston Redskins. And Boston would not support the team, and so they decided to move, and they moved to Washington. And of course, that's the Washington Redskins. But these powers to be in the NFL never forgot Boston, and they said Bucko said that's the biggest reason why you'll see a lot of decisions by the NFL hierarchy go against Boston, and they will not put Gino Cappelletti into the Hall of Fame, especially since he's Italian, because they don't like Italians. So all you Italians out there, come on, get on the stick. Let's get to Gino Cappelletti. Now, let me remind you about something. I was around in those days. Gino Cappelletti, his very first year, was a defensive back, and he shared a record until somebody made it 4. But he had 3 interceptions in one game, and he was a great, great player, and he made the All-Star team as a defensive back his first year, but he also kicked. Then he went over to wide receiver, and he won, in 6 years, he won 4 of the scoring championships. By his 3rd year, he's a wide receiver, but he's so great, but he's not going to get elected to the All-Star game as a wide receiver because there were some other great, great wide receivers. So the commissioner says, we have to create another position so Gino can be on this thing. And so they created one position for special teams. That's how much Gino meant to it. Now for the city of Boston, Gino was, he had a nightclub called the Point After. Tons of people from all the other sports. The Bruins used to be there, the Celtics, the Red Sox forever, loading up the place. And people would go out to these games in droves. And it's been said many times, Gino Cappelletti did everything but sell popcorn and park cars. They weren't too sitting. He wasn't selling popcorn. If the Patriots fail, don't forget there were many games where they only had seating capacity to have a stadium for like 25,000. If the Patriots don't make it in Boston, there's no place else to go. They go down the drain. If the Patriots drop out of the AFL, the AFL breaks in part, it splits up, and we don't have the NFL the way it is today. Not to mention his play. He's the only man in NFL history to average over 100 points per game. He's the only man, his scoring average was 7.4 points per game for his entire career. The closest in the Hall of Fame to that, I think, is Jan Stenerud with like 5.7 points per game in the Hall of Fame. Gino Cappelletti belongs in the Hall of Fame. Speak about it to all your friends and tell them, just holler, yell, and scream. Bob Kraft has some influence out there. They should do something about it. Gino Cappelletti is 75 years old, and not to mention all the years that everybody watching the everybody watching the Patriots games turns down the sound, just like they always did to Johnny Most. They turn down the sound and turn up the radio and listen to Gil Santos and Gino Cappelletti. Gino Cappelletti was second to none in whatever he did. And your Boston Patriots, New England Patriots, if you will, in 11 straight years of playing, Gino Cappelletti never missed a game. And he was one of the greatest ambassadors for the AFL and the NFL, and naturally for the Boston Patriots, New England Patriots. So think about that. And that's pretty much my story about Bucko Kilrea and how Boston is just, in Bucko's words, he said, these guys just say, hey, Boston is nothing more than an appendage to the rest of the country. And that's the way it is, and it certainly looks that way. Okay? Well, now we're down to 2 minutes. About 4 minutes ago, we were down to 3 minutes. So let's hope that we're going to wrap up the show anyway. But the Patriots, I think they're going to win big. I look at what happened last week as a wake-up call. Bill Belichick, I believe, is going to start exerting himself a little bit more into the defense. And you might see some of these players. McCourty is now a safety, and that's going to be better for him and for the team because he's going to be playing out there in center field with all the plays in front of him, and that's what he needs. I'm not certain if it's not because he's not as fast as some of these guys, or maybe it's just the schemes that they call. But at any rate, that's a step in the right direction, and I'm looking for the Patriots to win, and I still think they have the best team in the NFL. But, of course, the NFC, they got some real tough guys out there. San Francisco is one of them. But let's see what happens. Okay, that wraps up the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we brought a little sunlight into your life. The battle cry is, get Gino Cappelletti into the Hall of Fame. Okay? And my name is Jim Tuberosa. The name of the show is Real Grass, Real Heroes, a look at the golden age of sports. If there's any topics that you guys out there and girls would like to broach in future shows, please give us a call. Thanks for watching. See you again.